wonderful subscribers. So you guys, are you doing anything right now? Well, you can watch this video. Hello everyone, it's Sam, aka Ocean Unknown, and welcome back to my channel. So I recently participated in a voice acted playthrough of Deltarune with my Discord friends, where I voiced Queen, Noelle, and some side characters. Because of that, Deltarune has been on my mind lately, so I wanted to make a video essay about it. There's hundreds of video essays and theory videos about Deltarune, but I haven't seen a video about this topic specifically, so I'm making it now. So everyone, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Men Are Different is a short story written by Alan Bloke that tells the tale of a robot archaeologist discovering the last human on Earth. The robot strives to learn what truly is the difference between humans and machines like itself, and everyone it knows tells it that humans are very much like robots from the inside out. On one of its archaeology expeditions, the robot meets the last man on Earth, and they quickly bond together. However, one day the human complains about the heat, and the robot assumes his thermostat circuits are fried. With this inference, the robot tries to repair the man as if he were a robot by stabbing his neck with a needle and opening him up. This is when the robot realizes that it was wrong and that humans are in fact very different from robots. Their insides are not the same and humans can't be brought back after they've been shut down. The short story ends with the robot simply accepting that, yes, men are indeed different. This story on the surface may seem like a cautionary tale about artificial intelligence and how humans could one day be eradicated. I will admit, I almost wrote, will one day be eradicated, but I need to, not scare my audience. However, Men Are Different at its core is a cautionary tale about how a lack of knowledge and understanding can lead to catastrophe. The robot genuinely believed humans could regenerate like machines because it was told that robots and humans were nearly identical. At the end of the story, the robot realizes that it was wrong and sees that men and robots are very different. And the real lesson the story teaches us is that drastic, unthinking action without prior knowledge can lead to dangerous consequences. This brings us to Deltarune is a role-playing, story-based video game developed by Toby Fox, the guy who made the game with the hot skeleton that killed the queen, and the goat mom. Deltarune is in the same universe as Undertale, sort of. It has some of the characters we all know and love. However, Deltarune is more of an alternate universe of Undertale, with the characters having different lives, like Alphys being a school teacher instead of a scientist, and Asgore owning a flower shop instead of being the king of the underground. In Deltarune, we play as Chris, a teenage human who lives in the monster world with Toriel and her son Azriel, who is currently away at college. Chris forms an unlikely friendship with the school's local rebel, Susie, as they discover dark worlds that are drastically different from their daily lives. With them discovering these dark worlds, they become enveloped in a quest with an inhabitant of the dark worlds, a goat mage named Ralsei, to seal the dark fountain so their energy doesn't end the world. Undertale teaches us that our choices impact the world around us to the point that we could either save the beloved characters or send them to their graves, whereas Deltarune subverts the messages present in Undertale by blatantly rejecting the concept of the player's choices. When the player customizes their character, the vessel, it is immediately destroyed and everyone plays as Chris no matter what. No matter how fast you run, Susie will always yell at you to run faster, and Chris as a character rejects the player's choices and control, since at the end of chapters 1 and 2, Chris rips out the soul, the piece that the player controls. Without the control of the player, Chris acts rather violently, slashing Toriel's tires and opening up another dark fountain in their own home. There's also an overarching theme so far of escapism, with the two established dark worlds representing common forms of escapism: card and board games with the Card Castle world and the internet with Cyber World. These themes of the subversion of the concept of choice present in Undertale and escapism aid in the understanding of what I believe will be the central focus of Deltarune moving forward: determinism. Unlike determination, the frequently mentioned feeling that is of ungodly power in Deltarune, determinism actually refers to the opposite. By definition, determinism is the philosophy that every event that happens in our lives is already determined by causes external to our own free will. This is often equated with the theatrical naturalism of the early 20th century with plays like The Cherry Orchard by Anton Chekhov, where the characters have little to no agency over their fates, and they do nothing to change it. The cherry orchard is always going to be chopped down in the end, and in the end of Deltarune, no matter how much we as the player try to get Chris to do the right thing, they still rip their soul out at the end of every chapter and end up causing harm to others. I think the point of Deltarune is that we can't control Chris. We as the players will never have agency over them to change their actions and make them feel certain ways about certain characters. However, as to not make the story of Deltarune completely bleak, I think the lesson of each chapter will be how you choose to handle the lack of agency and grips of determinism. This has already been prevalent in Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, with Chapter 1 being about the power of connection, as this chapter establishes our main crew of Chris, Susie, Ralsei, and Lancer. And as far as Chapter 2, well, that's what this video is all about. Chapter 2 of Deltarune teaches a lesson about one of the easiest tools to fight against determinism: knowledge. We hear the word smart constantly thrown around in Chapter 2 in relation to Berdly, and in my opinion, this, alongside all of the computer and internet references in Chapter 2, are absolutely intentional to convey how knowledge can give us a sense of agency to overcome the dread of determinism. And all of this is encapsulated perfectly into one character. As the primary antagonist of Chapter 2, Queen is our look into the dangers of giving into determinism and losing agency completely. For some context, Queen is a computer. Smart. And it is very clear from her speech patterns, use of texting acronyms, and generally odd nature that she is intended to be a parody of the internet and the culture it's created. While it's easy to write Queen off as a comic relief style villain with her ridiculous lines like potassium or I only play mobile games, there's so much more to her character and potentially her impact on Deltarune as a whole. There's a very good video essay that discusses how Queen is symbolic of the issues that several of the characters in Deltarune have with their moms, which I highly recommend you watch that video if you're interested. There's also the more serious aspects to her character, including the fact that she knows about the power of determination, which we know is typically only in humans due to the entries in the True Lab of Undertale. However, the way that Deltarune explains the existence of determination between the light world and the dark worlds is that Lightners, the inhabitants of the light world, possess determination inherently, and the characters in the dark fountains do not possess determination. This information that we learn from Queen's monologue before the final battle against her, we also learn that someone with determination must stab into the earth to create a dark fountain, which later on we see her ask Noelle to do this, and then we actually see Chris stab the earth and open a dark fountain in their own home after ripping out their soul. Queen in this monologue is quite smart, as we see what she is referring to come into fruition very soon after. We also at this point already know Queen's motivations as to why she wishes to create more dark fountains. Even with her threats of world domination and turning Noelle's face into a robot one, Queen says during her drunken scene with Chris, I just want to make everyone smile, and if I become an evil villain to accomplish that, is that bad? Queen is not a completely malevolent character. She seemingly cares about the characters, especially Noelle, and her goal is to make all of them, alongside the citizens of the cyber world, happy. Of course, there are characters who are in opposition to her, like the Sweet Captain Cakes trio and Spamton, but opposition is natural when a society is a monarchy and has a singular figurehead in charge of basically the whole world of cyber world, as well as her tendency to capture people in cages and use various forms of mind control. And also, Queen overtook Spamton as the popular person in the cyber world, so of course the resentment is going to be there on Spamton's part. But back to the point I'm trying to make, Queen's intentions are not that of a villain. She wants everyone to lead happy lives, and most notably, she wants Noelle to see her inner strength and determination. In the conversation in her car after the normal Spamton fight, she explicitly says she wants Noelle to be her peon because she's strong. There's some heavy implications in this simple line. We know that Queen as a computer can see all of the characters' search histories, and Noelle's search history is full of somber searches related to the disappearance of her sister, Des. From her internet searches, Queen is aware of at least some of the trauma and tragedy in Noelle's life, and she recognizes how strong and determined she is despite the life that she is currently in with her family. Noelle is truly the embodiment of inner strength and the determination that Queen desires so badly. She also recognizes the lack of parental love in Noelle's life, with her father being in the hospital and her mother being the town's mayor, and heavily implied to be an extremely judgmental and neglectful parent. Going back to the universal mother theory I discussed earlier, Queen tries to be motherly to Noelle, but but she can't. Queen is still a massive allegory for an overbearing, pressuring mother, which makes sense for the relationship that Noelle has with her own mother. She is acting based on what she thinks Noelle wants, but she truly doesn't know what Noelle or any of the characters want, and thus follows through with what she seemingly wants, which is world domination. She doesn't know how to parent or care for Noelle, but she still makes an attempt to in order to make everyone happy. Even when she is annoyed by certain characters like Berdly, she upfront says there's nothing wrong with him other than that he's annoying, which, fair. Moving on. When Queen is defeated for the final time, she insists that Noelle should stop the earth to open more dark fountains. Noelle stands up to Queen, saying that she will never be happy in a world controlled by Queen, in which Queen replies, "Perhaps my computations were miscalibrated. Disregard me, and with your own power, choose the world that makes you happy," before she runs out of power. In that moment, Queen saw Noelle's determination to protect herself and her friends appear and stop trying to control her. Noelle being able to stand up to Queen is also a stand-in for Noelle being able to stand up to her strict and overbearing mother, and Queen is actually able to give Noelle a decently loving response by asking her to choose the world that makes her happy. While an apology would have been nice, it's more than what most parents both in fiction and reality would have done in this situation. However, Noelle then questions if this world created by the Dark Fountain wouldn't be so bad, just as long as Queen wouldn't be ruling over it, saying that this world is so much better than their normal lives. Everyone slowly starts to agree with her, except for Ralsei, as Berdly raises his battle axe to stab the earth and form more dark fountains. But before Berdly can open up more dark fountains, Ralsei tells everyone to stop. Ralsei goes on to explain the roaring, the consequence that will happen if the dark fountains remain intact. If the dark fountains are not sealed, the world will fall into chaos and titans will take form and devastate the land. Ralsei begs the other characters the question, "Is that your idea of paradise?" As the game returns to arguably one of the funniest still shots in the game, with Queen's mouth agape and her eyes being just red circles as she says, "Oh damn, I did not know that." As Ralsei is so confused as to how she didn't know about the roaring, Queen simply replies, "I'm just a computer, LMAO. I don't know everything. I was just guessing based off the knight's actions. Why the hell would I want to end the world?" Queen genuinely had zero clue what would happen if the dark fountain stayed open, as did none of the characters except for Ralsei. She, along with everyone else, believed that the dark fountains were a good thing and could be a utopian world for all of the characters where they could escape all of their problems. However, Ralsei's knowledge of the roaring leads the other characters to rethink their actions and ideas and revert back to their original task at hand of sealing the dark fountains. As Queen says goodbye to our main characters for now, and Chris and Susie seal the second fountain, we get into the meat, or tofu, I'm a vegetarian, of the topic of this video. With the central theme of Deltarune being how we truly have no control over our main character Chris and the events of the story, Chapter 2 demonstrates a method of how to cope with the lack of control that both the characters have in the story and the lack of control we sometimes have over our own lives, through the use of knowledge. Knowledge is one of the most impactful weapons against determinism and catastrophe. If one cannot learn the potential consequences of their actions, they will act impulsively and do things that will hurt the people they care about. We see this with Queen wanting to rule the world and keep the Dark Fountain alive in the name of having Noelle by her side, but keeping the Dark Fountain unsealed will lead to the apocalyptic event of the roaring, which she explicitly says she didn't know about. And then with Noelle, Berdly, and Susie, we see them assume that because of their fun adventures in the dark world, that this world of escapism is the key to leaving their problems behind them. Ralsei acts as the voice of reason, or more the voice of knowledge, for everyone to understand that they can't stay in this fantasy land of action and adventure, and although they have little to no agency in their regular lives, they need to eventually wake up from their dreams. This actually ties a lot back to the Universal Mother video that inspired a lot of this video, because a part of the reason why everyone except Ralsei wants to stay in the dark world is to escape their ordeals back at home. The dark worlds act as a form of escapism for all of these characters, where they can fight monsters, heal anything with a magic spell, and the most unrealistic aspect of the dark world, standing up to authority. We see in the story that Noelle's life at home is not very healthy. Her older sister is missing, her father is in the hospital, and her mom is incredibly controlling and overbearing. While we haven't seen or heard anything about Susie's family, it is implied that Susie has a strained relationship with her family and that it's possible that her family recently moved to hometown, thus straining their relationship even further. Then with Berdly, it's heavily implied that Berdly's parents are very neglectful, and thus Berdly feels like he must be smart to earn love, rather than knowing that he can be loved unconditionally, which explains why he felt so overwhelmed by praise after winning the spelling bee. And then there's Chris. Of course, in this moment in the story, we are still controlling Chris because the soul is within them. However, as we see at the end of chapter 2, Chris does exactly what Queen says the knight did and stabs the earth in their own home, opening up a new dark fountain. It's also important to note that Chris's home life is not healthy either, with Toriel and Asgore going through a divorce, it being implied that Toriel is irresponsible with alcohol, and Toriel and Asgore seeming to only care about their son Asriel, who is currently away at college. Chris is the one who actively chooses against using knowledge to escape the lack of agency, but that's because Chris to an extent actually has agency. Of course, there's the whole theory that Chris is the knight that Queen mentioned in her monologue, but I personally see it a bit differently. Do I think Chris to a certain degree is the knight? Yes. However, I think any of the Light World characters in any other circumstances could have stabbed the earth and became the knight. We literally saw Berdly almost do this. But since Chris was the one who opened up the next dark fountain, Chris is likely the new knight. My theory is that the villains of each Deltarune chapter will follow the theme of chess pieces. In chapter 1, we had the Chaos King, who we only saw at the very end of the chapter and moved quite slowly like a king piece in chess. In chapter 2, we had Queen, who moved freely across the chapter, like a queen chess piece. We also saw the advancement of a character who mimics her pawns to grow and become more powerful, like how a pawn can become queen in chess with Spamton and the secret Spamton boss fight. I think in the upcoming chapters, there will be a rook, bishop, knight, and pawn themed antagonists. Where my theory changes up a bit is that since there are 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 2 knights, and 6 pawns in a game of chess, I think the same will be true for Deltarune. Most importantly to this video is the concept of there being 2 knights, which I will dub the original knight and the new knight. I've already established that in this theory, Chris is the new knight who will attempt to carry out the start of the roaring, but who is the original knight? Honestly, I don't have a lead on a prime suspect, but it could be a list of people. It could be Des, or Rouse, or Azrael, or Gaster, or a character we haven't even been introduced to yet. Getting back on topic, Chris is the outlier amongst the characters, as Chris is the one who has agency over the events of the story. They are to Deltarune as Lil Hopkin is to the Cherry Orchard. As Chris is the one with true agency over the events of the story, the coping skills against determinism that have been taught in the current chapters of Deltarune have little to no meaning to Chris, as even after Chris learns about the roaring, they still make the decision to open up a new dark fountain in their own home. However, even if Chris is our outlier, we can still learn from this lesson. If we don't take the only initiative that we can, which is to learn and make decisions with strong intentions and understanding to back them up, then the consequences for our actions will worsen deeply. The ending of chapter 2 of Deltarune shows us the importance of thinking before we act. The heavy emphasis on smarts and technology leads us up to this very moment, as we see that the 2 characters most associated with intelligence in this chapter, Queen and Berdly, are actually the ones in the wrong. They chose to act impulsively by thinking that they were doing the right thing for themselves and those they care about, and that they were making the right decision solely on the fact that they are smart individuals. But in the end, they were one step away from causing a complete catastrophe and hurting everyone. Although Deltarune chapter 2's main story ends with the characters understanding why the fountains need to be sealed and how to fight against determinism, well, other than Chris for the most part, we do see what happens when a character is forced into a place of zero agency and is forced to act without any knowledge of the consequences. Chapter 2's genocide route, also known as the snowgrave route, is a demonstration of the horrifying and sometimes even deadly things that can happen when someone is stripped of any sense of control that they previously had. In this route, the player as Chris makes Noelle use ice shock spells to freeze all of the inhabitants of Cyber City. While Noelle says she is getting stronger from the enemy she has frozen, it's clear that as the route progresses, Noelle is terrified of what Chris, or more us, are making her do. This starts to become very apparent during the ring scene when Chris says to the shopkeeper that they and Noelle are something else, which further pushes the narrative of Chris's and our creepy behavior, as it's been established in Deltarune that Noelle only sees Chris as a friend and that Noelle has a crush on Susie. This is also where the lines between what Chris's actions are and what our actions are really start to blur. I will sometimes say Chris, but it's clear that we are the ones doing this to Noelle and not Chris. The shopkeeper offers a ring to them, which will always be $1 more than what you currently have. And then Chris continuously pressures Noelle to get the ring. Even with her pleas to not get it because they don't have the money, we keep on pleading until she freezes the shopkeeper and steals the ring. We keep making Noelle freeze enemies and then continuously put her in dangerous situations by telling her to proceed over and over monotonously. Also, in order to complete the snowgrave route, we must make Noelle wear the thorn ring, which it explicitly states in the game will hurt her when she's wearing it. Susie even calls it a torture device if you try to give it to her later on. This route culminates in the final encounter with Berdly, back where the route started. Noelle doesn't even recognize him at first and sees him as another enemy to freeze. When she sees Berdly as her childhood friend, her worry starts to rise, but she is still in this manipulated state that the actions we have forced onto her are making her stronger. We continuously mash the button that at this point is so familiar to us. Proceed. As Berdly vows to protect Noelle from Chris, well really from us, the battle is initiated. We continuously tell Noelle to defend herself until we have the maximum amount of TP to make Noelle cast the spell that gives this route its name. Snowgrave. This spell is never mentioned anywhere else in Deltarune, and the only information given when you choose it is fatal. Upon making Noelle cast the spell, she out loud says she doesn't know what it is. We continue pressuring her to cast the spell as she says again and again that she has no idea what to do. After further pressure, Noelle says, "Fine. You want to see what happens so bad? Watch what happens when I cast a spell I don't know." As Noelle's eyes go completely white and she levitates in the air, Snowgrave is cast, killing Berdly. The final line Noelle says before casting Snowgrave, "Watch what happens when I cast a spell I don't know," perfectly encapsulates how this route in Chapter 2 lends to the theme of thinking about the consequences and how under extreme pressure, knowledge and the warnings can completely fly out the window. Even though she's scared and openly says she doesn't know the Snowgrave spell, she casts the spell because we pressured her to. The knowledge and actions in this moment are no longer in Noelle or even Chris's hands. It's in our hands, the players. And because for us in the real world, this is merely a game and we can look up what happens when Noelle uses this spell and even know of this different route, we can treat this like a game we can control. We aren't hurting real people, so we can watch Noelle's eyes go white as she encases Berdly's lifeless body in a crystal of cold ice and not suffer the consequences. But you kind of feel bad about what you've done, don't you? While Deltarune as a whole has this theme of determinism and the lack of agency in both the characters in the game and the players, the Snowgrave route gives the players the role of the puppet master that we normally expect from video games to control the actions around us and be the central figure in this little fictional universe where all of the actions surrounds us. The Snowgrave route even gives us a little nudge reference to this, or a massive one with the final boss of the Snowgrave route being Spamton, a literal marionette. However, Deltarune makes us feel guilty for having the absolute control that we would traditionally expect. Even before the Snowgrave route, the characters call this out, specifically Susie when she asks why Chris is the one who always gets to make choices, which is the scene right before the player can decide whether or not to do the Snowgrave route. We grow attached to these characters, and seeing Noelle's desperation and despair as we make her cast the fatal spell leaves the players with that same feeling of despair. This is why some fans, including myself, are inclined to say that this is worse than Undertale's genocide route, because in Undertale we were always given that choice. The neutral route is always a safety net in case you make a mistake of killing a character. In Deltarune, the one time we make the characters not act on their own intuition and knowledge, we destroy them. The most haunting thing about the Snowgrave route is watching this sweet and innocent character Noelle get crushed as our knowledge of this secret route makes her act completely out of character and kill her close friend. Noelle's lack of knowledge of what is going on makes this equally more terrifying to witness as she pleads not to cast the spell. It's clear that she just wants to go back to the way things were, to wake up. The Snowgrave route is a truly horrifying story of Noelle being forced into having no control and forced to act without knowing the consequences of her actions. With the absolute horror of this route, I'm terrified, yet intrigued of where Toby Fox will go with this story next. I could be completely wrong. Anyways, in conclusion, Chapter 2 of Deltarune's theme of knowledge helps us understand the characters and their motivation and aids in the narrative storytelling. Deltarune is a game filled with countless interpretations and themes, and I am so excited to see where the story goes from here. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell for notifications. And comment down below what you're looking forward to in the upcoming chapters of Deltarune. I'll see you all in the next video. Thank you so much.